So I'm here to talk about fear today. Are you all in? Are you all game for that? I'll say this. 97% of the fear, 97% of the fear and worry that's flying around in your head will never come to pass. 97% of that will never come to pass. Now, where did I find that from? I found it at 4 in the morning on Reddit. But, I mean, it hasn't been measured. It hasn't been measured. You can't really measure it. But if you look and Google search for those things, you're going to find things like 85%, 90%, 99% of the things that you worry about. So whether you agree with the exact number a lot or not, a lot of fears are a waste of time, money, health, right? All the cortisone in your body. Your whole fear about self-image might cause you to spend money on things. It might create retail therapy. It's clearly not desirable. And it's the number one thing that people in spiritual circles want to let go of is fear of some description. Just think, fear stops us in our tracks. It can make our world smaller. It can shrink our world. It makes us unhappy. It makes us anxious. Sometimes we can't sleep because of it. And we have this hypervigilance. We're waiting for the next ugly thing to rear its head. Fear of this, there's so many different types of fear that one talk cannot adequately address. You all may have maybe your pet fear that you brought here today. I can't adequately address all of those things, but I'm going to try. I'll try to, as best I can. Has anyone ever seen this picture? Ruben has. On November 12th, 1833, a meteor shower was so intense that they estimate that 100,000 meteors fell down from the sky every hour. People thought the world was ending, which inspired this to be this artist to create it was not color, it became color later, but to carve this in wood. And there are many other people around the world who made art about that at that time, 1833. But guess what? The world didn't end. It was just the unknown. It was just the uncertainty. It was something occurring that had never happened before in history that created uncertainty. I'll say that again. Something occurring in the world that had never happened before that created uncertainty and made us scared. Perhaps appropriate for what's going on today. And the media, they know that fear sells. They know that fear sells. Breaking news, breaking news, right? And then it'll repeat every 10 minutes. That story will repeat. And then an hour later, oh my gosh, breaking news. And it's the same story. Now, I support the media. I support the free media, absolutely. But media of all kinds, they know they need your eyeballs. They need your fearful eyeballs. Fear sells. You can talk about the traditional Catholic Church. Fear sells, right? Hell sells. Well, the problem with fear is that we're recycling these thoughts over and over again in our head. We're ruminating. We're giving them power. We're getting all worked up. And knowing that most of what we imagined will never come to pass. When I was a kid, one of my biggest fears was that people would find out that I couldn't swim because all my neighbors could swim. So I thought, okay, everyone in the world can pretty much swim except for me. How embarrassing. And that was a fear of mine that people would see that, and I was so ashamed in that. But isn't that silly? Do you have any silly fears that you carried that just were silly and not real? And notice that these fears are in your head. That's where they exist. And you're making it worse than it is. or worse than it has to be. So I took a look at what is fear really. Fear is a physiological response, not to the event. It's your physiological response to the thought that you're creating about the event. One can say all events are neutral. Have you noticed two people might observe one event and one might say, this too shall pass. I've seen this before. My mother went through it. It's going to pass. This is what's happening. And then someone else might have a totally freaked out reaction. So the event is the event, and how we react to it is what is running our fear. So the fear can be in our imagination. Anybody ever remember the movie L.A. Story with Steve Martin? It's a good movie. Watch it. He says in it, I've had 7 heart attacks, all of them imagined. Can you relate to that at all, baby? And I'm not saying that our fears are unfounded. Some of them are absolutely, we need fear to a certain degree to survive. But so many of our fears are running us. They're running the show, right? So consider this. Is fear something that we can call a choice? Is it a choice to be in fear or not? Whether you agree with it, it's an interesting consideration. In this movie called After Earth, which starred Will Smith, pre-slap, he said, that's a little joke, he said, fear is not real. It is the product of thoughts you create. Do not misunderstand me. The danger is very real, but the fear is a choice. So something to think about. It may apply to some of your fears. Another fear viewpoint, this is from Teal Swan, viewing fear as a teacher, which I've talked about. Fear as an ally, fear as a teacher, fear as a tool. Teal Swan said, fear is an illusion created for the purpose of expansion. Fear is an illusion created for the purpose of expansion. Fear always means that something needs to be looked at and that there's something to be learned. Examining your fear, making self-loving decisions as a result of examining your fear should be done. Maybe if you fear speaking in public, upon examination you'll find that it is self-loving to go through with it and speak in public. Or maybe you'll find that it's the self-loving thing to do, to say, no thanks. I will not do that because protecting myself is more important. I will be gentle with myself, as Karen Drucker would say. But she says, Teal Swan says, never ignore the fear, examine it, use it. But I'll say, and I've said this before, you don't have to face your fears. You read it everywhere. Oh yeah, the only way is to face your fear. Well, if I have a fear of roller coaster, I don't have to get on a roller coaster. If I have a fear of skydiving, I don't have to skydive. I don't even have to fly. I really don't want to fly anymore. I don't. So I choose not to fly. In that previous example, I have a fear of public speaking, but I'm here because my message is more important. And I find that over time, I went from 10 years ago, I would not give a 5-minute talk. But then I started to give talks, and I noticed the fear, and it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And so your desire, something else in the heart outweighs the fear and becomes more important than the fear. And notices the fear, but says, all right, fear, I see you. I see you're making my heart beat faster, but I'm going to do this anyway. So, you should look at your fears. Here's something that I read that was very valuable. You should look at your fears with either curiosity or humor. I mean, you're already examining your fears with fear, right? You're fearing your fear sometimes. But if you have a fear and you say, the curiosity part is this, why am I so afraid of this? Or the humor part. Just adding humor is a great way to just diffuse those fears. Someone had a few notes about that, about examining your fears, and it was Michael Hunter. He's a social media influencer, and he said, Here are the 4 problems with fear and worrying. Problem 1, worrying absolutely solves nothing. It's like rocking in a chair. You're moving, but you're not going anywhere. You're exerting a lot of energy, but you're not going anywhere. 2, worrying affects your vibe. Good luck manifesting your dream while radiating anxious hamster wheel energy. Right? I mean, it's not, for those of you who pay attention to the law of attraction and the vortex and Esther Hicks, it's not a good vibe. It's not going to get you anywhere if you have this anxious vibe, this anxious energy. Number 3, he said, worrying is a thief. It steals your time, your focus, and it steals your happiness. It zaps your power. So let's take our power back from fear. It can be a lifelong work, but let's do this. Let's begin this today. How should we do this? We need to diffuse fear. We can deconstruct. You know, they talk about deconstructing a salad. We need to deconstruct the fear. We need to break it down. And one of the ways I thought about for doing this is to employ this whole body, this integrated approach that comes from mind, body, and spirit. And I could give a talk every single Sunday on fear. There's so much advice in terms of what to do, but I cherry-picked here and I thought about, okay, mind, body, spirit, and I'm going to name a few. So let's start with the mind. Wayne Dyer said, don't believe everything you think. You know, it starts with self-criticism. Don't believe your thoughts about yourself, but don't believe everything you think about the object of fear. Don't believe everything you think. And a friend of, a very well-known friend of the late Wayne Dyer is Byron Katie. Has anyone ever heard of Byron Katie? So Byron Katie has something called The Work. And it's 4 questions. And that is her ministry. That's her entire, that's what her books are about. You go for, anybody been on one of her retreats? If you go to one of her retreats, oh, have you? Wonderful. It's all about the work, isn't it? It's all about the work. And if it isn't, you can tell me about it later. But here are the 4 questions. It's called The Work by Byron Katie. Think about, let's just bring to mind something that a fear or a concern or a worry that you want to just use in this little experiment. And I'm going to ask you 4 questions. The first question is that thought true? The second question is, can you absolutely know that it's true, this thought you're having about the fear, about the object of fear? Can you absolutely know that it's true? Doesn't matter if the answer is yes or no. The next question is, how would you react? What happens when you believe that thought is true? Okay, let's play it out. This thing that you're fearful about, what happens if you believe that it's true? Just play that out. And notice the feelings. It may be a myriad of things that are triggered in you emotionally, but talking about it to yourself and understanding what strings are being pulled in your own emotions, it could be a string that's just pulled from past trauma, right? Could be a string that's being pulled from the ego or the unknown. The final question. So first question was, is the thought true? Second question is it absolutely true? Third question is, how do I feel if it's true? And the final question is, who would you be without that thought or fear? Who would you be? And how would you be without that thought? Without that fear? And so you can run this through with anything. You can run this through with any thought, with any fear, with any worry, with any concern, with anything that's getting you down. And it's called The Work by Byron Katie. So this is part of the mind approach to addressing and deconstructing and defusing fear. It very much brings to mind of like it's a bomb that's going to go off, and you're just going to snip the fuse. You're going to take the power away from fear so it stops taking the power away from you. Two quotes I found that are in this mind realm that you may want to consider. One is from Robert Reich. He's a political author, but I removed 2 words from what he said on Facebook, and it became a spiritual quote. Ready? He says, "If we allow ourselves to fall into fatalism, thinking we're doomed, or if we wallow in disappointment, or become resigned to what is rather than what should be, we lose. The greatest enemy of positive change is cynicism about what can be changed." Okay? I'm going to read that one more time. If we allow ourselves to fall into fatalism, thinking we're doomed, or wallow in disappointment, or become resigned to what is rather than what should be, we lose. The greatest enemy of positive change is cynicism about what can be changed. Okay? That can apply to any fear. Final quote in this mental area, before I move on, is, here's another one. It's from Facebook. I don't know the author, but wisdom comes from everywhere, doesn't it? This is just recycled wisdom from the great masters. That's all it is. It's recycled and retuned. And it says this: "Staying positive does not mean that things will turn out okay. Rather, it is knowing that you will be okay no matter how things turn out." I love that one so much. I'll read this again. "Staying positive does not mean that things will turn out okay. Rather, it is knowing that you will be okay no matter how things turn out." So that's diffusing fear from the mind. Now, diffusing fear from the body. There is something we talked about during the meditation called the relaxation response. But what we're seeking to diffuse is the stress response. So over here, when stress happens, an event happens, and your mind looks at it, your mind's freaking out, and your body listens. And your body responds using something called the sympathetic nervous system. Your heart increases. You sweat. All of your body processes start to pick up. Cortisol kicks in. All these neurotransmitters kick in. It's the fight or flight reaction from a part of the brain called the amygdala. But you can counter that. And any article on meditation talks about we need to go over here. So here is the sympathetic nervous system. Over here is, can anybody guess what is the parasympathetic? I thought it'd be like the anti-sympathetic, but it's the parasympathetic nervous system. And so you might hear words like the toning the parasympathetic nervous system, toning the vagus nerve, because that's where the parasympathetic nervous system lives and gives instruction from your mind to your body. So let's try it right now. Here's how to tone the parasympathetic nervous system. Take a deep breath and let it go. Difficult, right? That's the easiest way. And then the meditation, listening to your favorite music, art, doing artwork. They just, Maggie Owen Shannon's art, it's not called art therapy, but it really is, isn't it? It's toning this part of your nervous system that creates calm. You're overriding the amygdala. You're overriding the sympathetic response. And finally, I will close with a few things about, we've talked about mind, we've talked about body, I'm going to talk about spirit right now. Very briefly, there are so many spiritual practices that can be, this is a spiritual practice. Singing, listening to music, just being in the realm of somewhere where music is, being in the realm of community, meditation, prayer, service, all these things are spiritual practices. But one of the spiritual practices that helps to diffuse fear is when we see the divine as us and we do something called either affirmations, denials, or other truth statements. And I want you to try this on with me. And I wrote a few affirmations that I felt were particularly helpful for fear. So repeat after me. My hope is stronger than any fear. Good. This is just a chapter, not my whole life. Fear is not my future. Say it again. Fear is not my future. Good. I won't let fear steal my power. I will keep calm and carry on. Where did that sing? I think that's an old British military. World War II. It's still irrelevant. I will keep calm and carry on. Let's try this one. I know that wherever my journey takes me, that all shall be well. I'll feel the fear and do it anyway. All will be well. All is well. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. Now notice these things. Unity does not teach about a God outside of yourself. It teaches, but the prayer that we close with every Sunday is, it's like God is, the love of God enfolds me, the light of God, the light of God surrounds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. Okay, so this is a really, I'll close with this. This is a really handy way to view God. Viewing God as surrounding us can be very comforting. And this is where we turn to spiritual readings. This is where we turn to praying in the old-fashioned way. Or surrounding, does anybody have a book that gives them comfort, that is near them, that they know of when they reach for in hard times? I'm seeing people say yes. One of those books for me is a book called Quiet Talks with the Master by Eva Bell Werber. And Eva Bell Werber wrote 6 pamphlets, and each page has a spiritual reading. And this one has been with me for years, and I wanted to share it with you in closing. And Michael, if you could maybe give me some piano backing, I'd love to have this one. So I'm going to read this one. And this is, she lived at the same time when Unity was first forming. So she wrote this at the turn of the century. So think about that. And she's transcribing probably a channeled conversation between God and a person who is afraid. So if Jen, you'll show the first slide. I would speak to you further. I would speak further with you regarding the burdens which you bring to me, to be lifted from your heart and consumed by the altar fires. The question arises in your mind, Lord, can they just be consumed and thus leave my life? What of their effects? How shall taking the fear of them from my heart solve the problem? Listen carefully, my child, for this is the kernel at the heart of the message. It is only the fear and the weight of the burden, the outer wrappings that are burned at the altar. This leaves the heart of it exposed to the rays of my divine intelligence and wisdom. This washes and purges it in a holy readjustment. Unseen but mighty forces take the heart out of the problem and work it out on the basis of my truth and my perfect harmony. Readjustment in the outer life must and shall follow as the daylight follows night. So you see, my beloved, there is never cause to fear. Never are you justified in carrying for one moment a thing which distresses you. And so it is.